Busetta, you still awake over there?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't see Joe. I'm behind the pole. Update on East School renovation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening. I have Joe Ellicott, our architect, here for the evening. My name is David Busetta. For the new members I've not met, I'm the facility director. We're here to talk about East School and some of the work that we've been doing on basically we're looking at the feasibility of the site, and we're giving you a update on our progress so far, what we've been doing and how it's coming along. What we did in the packet, we've given you the Torrington Public Schools feasibility study that we had handed this out a couple of years back, about 2 years ago. And it's really showing a lot of the deficiencies that are at the East School right now. It's still called the New East School, but it's going on 1976, I guess, and we're working on 40 years here. And so what we've looked at is we're looking at the grand scheme of a project that has 29 existing classroom spaces right now. And the site that poses a lot of potential challenges. We'll put it out there as a challenge. And what we're looking at is, this is the last school here in town that we're probably going to be renovating. We want to see what we can do with that site and what we can't do with it. We're also, our furthest extreme right now is we're looking at approximately 18 to 20 classrooms to add on to the building to see how that would work out. We're also looking at different configurations on where to put those 20 classrooms at the site. The topography, once again, is how, where we're going to fill, where we're going to make cuts. We've taken an architect, not an architect, but a surveyor. He's been out there. We've had the boundaries done. We're also looking at getting our wetlands flagged, so that can be part of it. We've had a civil engineer out there looking at the topography again to see how the cuts will have to be made, how much fill will have to be there, so we can put the plans on top of that map. Wetlands will have to be flagged. I don't know if I mentioned that. And we're also going to have to do probably a geotechnical study of the soil to see what's under it, how much topsoil is there, how much rock is there, how easily it's going to be, how easily it's going to be to build. So Joe here has given us a few renderings. He's giving us a few renderings on what the building may look like with all those classrooms on there. Are we going to, there's a lot of questions that come into play when you start adding all these different classrooms to the site. For instance, if we do put 18 to 20 classrooms in there, do we make the cafeteria bigger? Do we change the gym around? There's a lot of different ways that we can look at this and go forward with it. So once again, we're trying to give the board some options on how this renovation is going to look and what it's going to accomplish, and how we can get the best bang for our buck. We're also looking at possibly, that it was in our charge to look at, do we want to move Midgeon Avenue up there and put that into the building and incorporate that into a addition or a second floor onto the east school. So there's a lot of different things going on here, and we just want you to see, and hopefully we can answer some questions or give more information. Joe, you want to just add on to the?
Good evening. Yes, as David mentioned, we looked at several options, on this site. Again, as I mentioned, there are many challenges. If you look at this scheme, which we sort of honed in on, basically because as we started to develop the different concepts, this one started to give us some options that allowed for the most expansion of the school. We sort of took that approach. To what extent can that site be developed, as David mentioned, with some challenges, and how many classrooms can be put on that site. In the light-colored area, that's the existing school, approximately 65,000 square feet of each school total, first and second floors. The idea, similar to what was mentioned on the report, would be to renovate that part of the school and renovate as new, which means you renovate the entire school entirely to bring it up to current code standards, whether it's ADA code, building codes, fire safety codes. So you would renovate the existing school to current standards. As far as expanding the school, we looked at what would be sort of, how do you expand a school and get many pre-K and kindergarten classrooms on a site like this, but which would be for possibly 800 students, but how do you scale that down in terms of sort of the philosophy of the school, the concept of the school? We came up with an idea of these sort of clusters of 4 classrooms, which would allow the students and teachers to interact in a sort of a smaller group in a larger school setting. So you'd have 4 classrooms that could interact daily in each cluster. So we developed these clusters that grew from the existing school around a new courtyard, which again would be another play area, a very secure area, and allows for light to come in. Kindergarten classrooms have to be, as preschool, also have to be on ground level. They can't be on a second floor or third floor of a facility. So as we developed that scheme, we started to look at the number of classrooms we can get on this site. And we were trying to, as David mentioned, use the number of about 20 additional classrooms to see if that would work for us. In this scheme here, we have 21 kindergarten classrooms on the first floor and 4 preschool classrooms. On the east side of the site, there would be an additional cluster of 4 kindergarten classrooms and a new administration area. Again, this is conceptual. I'm going to just stress that because there are many different iterations that can be derived from a study like this, and we're trying to see what can fit and what can conceptually work for the district. And again, on the east side would be the new administration wing for the school administration, principals, maybe a security office, and additional support staff. On the second floor, we looked again at the lighter color areas, the existing school, and then expanding a portion of the school to the north with 4 more classrooms. On the west side of the building would be again, whether this happens or not, it would be district Board of Education offices that would be on the second floor to see how much footage we could get on that site. We were able to work out about 10,000 square feet, which is a determination that was come up with over the past few years as to what the district Board of Education offices would need, about 10 to 12,000 square feet for new space. The portion that we relate to down in the lower level, these little clusters, which are sort of like little villages, would be just a one-story structure. In this scheme, what we did, we kept it down to, again, the scale of the cluster, both in plan and in elevation, to try to minimize the impact of a bigger building or a higher building. In terms of the site itself, we looked at taking, again, the lighter color area being the existing school and how the new additions could develop from and as an offshoot and radiate from that center school, and how we would then allow a new traffic pattern to be developed from the existing entrance and wrap around the building. As David mentioned, we're doing additional testing. We're going to be doing some test borings to really see what below surface problems there may be or there may not be. Is there rock? Is there some soils that may not be suitable for expansion? But in this scheme, we're connecting this new loop that would go to the new administration wing, and parking would be along that loop. So basically that, again, we were just trying to give you an idea on this one particular concept. You could, open up to questions, however you want to, go from there.
Paul, do you have any?
I don't know.
Okay, Chris? No. Ellen?
Sorry. My question's not really on this. This looks good, but, so if we move all the kindergartners in the district up to this facility, is there any other buildings that we can look at of possibly closing and consolidating our other schools? Will we still need 5 elementary schools, or could we do 4? I know we have some bonding
The
issues
feasibility
sometimes.
study that we did was not that long ago. I want to say it was 2 years, two and a half years
Right,
that
I
we
think
did that
then
feasibility.
there was only one school identified that possibly could be.
And there was only one school identified that possibly would be, and at the time, there was no place to put all the kids in the classrooms. I mean, they're bursting at the seams right now in elementary, and that was the biggest problem. There wasn't enough room in all the other schools to accept closing one school, and this was the only school available to close at the time. It still is.
Close as far as renovations go, and having to return funding.
Right.
Right. I don't know if we haven't gotten far enough to evaluate what the population in the other schools could look like upon this.
Well, yeah, you'd lose, I think I have to make sure I do this right. You'd lose 2 classrooms, so 4 half-days. But, yeah, you would lose 2 classrooms.
From each building.
From
I mean,
each
I just think
building.
from the taxpayer standpoint, we have to do our due diligence to justify that we would still need 5 elementary schools. And I think looking at current numbers, trends, making sure there's not any way that we could make this work by moving all the kindergartens and the other elementary schools.
And the other piece too is that as we look to expand our programs for children who require special needs or special service support,
Right.
we need extra space there. So,
It might be too early for this question. If it is, I'll ask it some other time. But approximately, what would be the length of the longest bus ride for a kindergartner? going to that school? Do you have any idea, or is that some other meeting, some other time?
Well, it takes, to go from one end of Torrington to the next
Yeah.
20 minutes, but, depending on how the traffic is, 30.
And I would agree closer to 30. My house is probably one of the furthest houses from East School. And it's a 30-minute ride from my house to East School with just myself and my family in the car. If you're on a bus and you're stopping
Right,
at every stop on the way down Highland Avenue and across town, you can be sure at that time. And I was stuck behind a bus this morning, and I was actually like timing, all right, how long did it take these kids to get on the bus? And so, yeah, that is a big concern for me, is, trying to get all of your kindergarten classes into the East School. I'm not sure that that will fly with the kids that live in the west end of Torrington, or even very much on the north end, way out towards Cardinal Way, those neighborhoods. And he didn't mean to just step in without the chair's recognition.
Well,
My question is also, and that was, my first question is exactly that. I think that we have to take that into consideration as we look at this. The capacity of East School, and I was just trying to pull up the strategic school profile on my phone, but you may have these answers off the top of your head. As I understand it, the capacity at East School is 540 students.
That, I don't have that on the top of my head.
Says on here, 440.
Well, this
Oh,
is
that's
a-
the current.
540,
Current versus-
540, I think, is your capacity. And the current enrollment is? 440. Okay.
But we also have 3 special education, district-wide special education programs
Programs
there
are
now.
now. And are there it's district-wide? There are no other special education programs, for instance, down at Southwest School or?
There's 3 at Vogel and 2 at Forbes. So, they're across the
There are a
district.
little bit, yes. Yeah.
The challenge with it, and when we looked at this, is under a certain age, they have to be first floor. So where the challenge comes into all of the other sites that we have, is we don't have the real estate to put more first floor classrooms. So that in just looking at this to see the feasibility of if it even fits, which is where we're at now, we're just trying to make sure that it even fits, is can we get all those first floor classrooms in a spot?
Is it necessary to get all of those first floor classrooms in one school building? And I'm just going to reflect on, and I swore I wasn't going to do this when I decided to show up at board meetings, but when we were on the board 6 years ago, we did look at all-day kindergarten, and with the very same, through the same lens, do we want to take it and put it in, maybe a downtown school where it's centralized and the busing issue is not that big of a deal? Or do we want to spread it out and have in a few different schools, some downtown, some east end? And at that point, we were really talking, it was going to be parents' choice because this was not mandated. And I know that it's not mandated now when you're trying to be planful and proactive. So I'd like to encourage that in your feasibility studies and you're looking through the various iterations of what could happen, that would also be looked at to see if there are other locations where perhaps you're not looking at 18 to 20 classrooms being added onto the East School, but perhaps finding space, finding that real estate on the first floor in some of the buildings that are already.
What it would do to us is we could reduce the footprint of that building, but we would still need the same number of rooms. Because if you displace a second or third grade or whatever in, we'll pick Southwest just as an example. If you use that first floor, those kids would have to be redistricted to east. But it would reduce the footprint size because you could put them in a second floor classroom versus a first floor classroom. But you still have the same number of kids, so, And with the half-day kindergarten classrooms we have, we automatically double our enrollment in all of the schools because to go full day.
Which is why I asked about the capacity and
Yeah.
the enrollment. And if we could see that in all of the schools, what is the capacity for every single one of our schools? What is the enrollment? And I realize, you know, that those change and, you know, they go in and out. But if we take that October 1st snapshot in time and go from there, what is there a difference in reimbursement rate for a school construction when it's labeled renovate to new?
Yes.
And what
When-
is that?
To renovate new, it depends on, like a totally new school, be 64% reimbursement versus 74% reimbursement. Torrington currently gets a 74% reimbursement on renovated new and addition to an existing school.
All right, so renovate as new and in addition would give us 74%.
74%, plus another minor percentage.
Well, and I think that I saw that somewhere and noticed that there may be some energy
There may be.
offsets also.
Exactly.
Right.
So to build totally new would be 64%.
Which
So-
I don't think there's a lot of appetite for that, to be honest.
Right, exactly.
Find a location for a new school, it's gonna be tough.
Walmart, we'd have to take over Walmart.
Walmart.
What's the only biggest flattest area in East End?
I have some brownfields that can be remediated and so.
There you go.
And a revolving loan fund too.
And it could be educational too.
Exactly. The question about moving your Midgeon Avenue sites up to the East School, there again, I'd like to see us really look at options, you know. Again, I'm reflecting even on this building that we're sitting in, knowing that this capacity is somewhere around 15, and I think current enrollment is somewhere around 11. Is there space here that those offices could be relocated to, as opposed to doing such a large construction project at the school?
We plan on keeping that as a separate line item, and it's just because the reason we added it to that is for the last 3 or 4 budget cycles that I've been here, every year it comes up close Midgeon after close Midgeon after close. So as an option, you're building the building, this would be, it'll be a separate cost. This would be the cost if we close this building and move to,
And I think
just to put it out there as an option.
And I think the other big concern was we are trying to get some of our outplaced students back into district.
Which is great news, but there again, where are you talking about bringing them?
Well, they're here already. We've
No,
been
even more, you're
I
saying
think we'd be
bringing
looking
more.
in each high school, middle school.
All right, so at the high
The
school.
extra space at the elementary schools that you pulled out of those 2 empty classrooms could become special
For
education.
elementary school children that
Classrooms, yes.
need special.
And these are outplaced kids that we're looking to bring back, not regular specialized students.
And there again, I think that if I could see what building capacity is and enrollment is, you know, those are the kinds of things. And if that's the case, you know, would that also require that same first floor access if you have these particular special needs students being brought back in the district? Do they have those kinds of requirements for location? No.
We need to-
It's not something you always ask.
It would depend which kid, what age group, what the disability is.
Is it the thought of the board that Midgeon Avenue then would be surrendered and given back to the city?
If we moved,
Haven't crossed that bridge yet?
no.
All right.
I have a strong feeling we're still, I think cost is going to prohibit us when we get to a project such as this.
I think that was all that I had, you know, certainly having this feasibility study, even as old as it is, available was very helpful to me. It's pretty amazing, some of the construction held up pretty well, some of it really didn't. But,
The basic structure of the building is sound.
amazing, yeah, that's what I was impressed with.
I think it was all the rock that they had to remove to put it on, so, and over the years, I was involved with, doing a few minor renovations here and there in that building. And yeah, you know, it's sound. Now it's a matter of, you know, dealing with some of the aspects of, you know, the mechanical systems, electrical systems need to be upgraded.
It's an energy
Oh,
based.
undoubtedly, yeah. And did I read in here, I may have read it too quickly, this building is not sprinklered?
It only has sprinklers in one area of the building, which is on that stage area, behind that stage area, that's it.
Right, which is a big concern. So, yeah, no, I think those are most of the questions that I had, in just this little bit of time I had to digest it, but going forward, I don't know if it's the board's plan to keep this as an agenda item so that it's being brought forward and discussed on a regular basis, because time is running short, and if there's going to be a decision that includes presenting a bonding package or a referendum, it's probably something you're going to want to discuss
So,
there, right?
yep. Mr. Henry, do you have any questions?
I do not. I have a few. When you looked at doing this, did you look at asking the city for Hogan Drive as a driveway? Considering it is the only building on that entire street, instead of trying to go around the building and create another traffic loop, actually having an access road that's sort of like the middle school driveway.
The problem with it is to get the off-street parking, or there's a 50-foot drop from the building to Hogan Drive in, what's it, 170 feet or something?
I got this.
Which is just short of a foot. So what we did look at was using the sidewalk on Hogan Drive as the bus drop-off area. But it's a considerable height for a kindergartner or a preschooler to be that far out of sight of the building. You know, because they're going to be dropped off in the woods, basically, and have to walk up the sidewalk and go in. So we looked at looping the driveway around the building and then tying it back into Hogan Drive. But we would have to raise Hogan Drive between 25 and 30 feet, which would impact the houses on Moore and Lyman, and you know, that would become a very extensive project. So right up till this actual teardrop came out, we were trying to get that driveway back out to Hogan Drive, and the only way to really do it is to raise Hogan Drive.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking you is right now the current driveway where the buses come in to drop off is being turned into a green area on the project. Because unless I was mistaken in what he was saying, the light colored area is the current building.
Correct.
Yeah,
The dark
actually, the
areas are
brown-
the new.
The
So
condition
directly,
sits on that top level where the buses would be, and into that first parking area.
Mhm.
Yep. You're right.
So,
Right.
yeah, so there's still the drop-off area right in the front of the building, which you're not getting rid of, for where the buses come in currently.
The drop-off area would actually be around that teardrop loop. That lower area is now all the parking. There's parking on both sides of that down there.
This here is all
Right.
parking here.
Yeah.
That's actually the lower lot that's existing now.
The existing drop-off that you're speaking of is up, this upper area.
Correct, but you're now taking the front of the building, if you go right up to Hogan Drive, go up to Hogan Drive, Dave. There you go, go over a little to the front of the building, right there. It looks like you're right on top of Hogan Drive from this perspective.
18 feet above it.
Yeah.
That's the problem. It is. It's
Yeah.
like there's a
That's
wall.
how- that's
how bad the
There's a
drop-off
straight
is,
wall.
right?
It's a 17, what was it, 17 feet?
Yes.
There's a 17-foot high
Because
retaining wall right there.
it doesn't look, it looks like you're right on
Right.
top of it.
Yeah, but that's where I said
And
you'd have to raise Hogan Drive to come up to that elevation. It's, basically, they put a school on Pikes Peak.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to balance it in there. You have a cliff on both sides.
Yeah, I keep looking at this saying, if you're creating a traffic loop with parents dropping students off, buses there dropping students off, I mean, it's gonna be a traffic nightmare in the
Yeah.
morning.
In
And
this-
it's gonna be a disaster in the afternoon.
In
I
that
don't wanna
perspective,
create
yet we
that.
haven't come up with any way.
Yeah, because I
to
don't
do
like
parent
going
drop-off.
around the back of the building to do a
Right.
loop to try to come back up.
No.
I-
That's not the front.
Yeah, the softball field is now the front of the building.
Right, where the loop
Yeah.
is
Like
the
within
front.
20 foot.
Yeah,
The
you-
back is where the parking is.
Yeah.
I
Basically.
understand that, but
The
again,
back is the now front.
yeah, but you're still creating a traffic disaster.
Mhm.
I mean,
Is there only the one way?
Well, we're also looking at now, excuse me, to take this loop as you come in and then to extend the loop down here. And that's part of the wetlands study that we're doing in soil borings. Will tell us, can we expand and have a driveway that actually could return on itself
Back
within
and
this
makes a
area?
parent drop off there. And this
And
this
then this
piece
area
here, we're
goes-
gonna try to condense this back into the building, so we lose that 18-foot wall a little bit
That's
there.
that's what the floor plan.
Took what was the alley and made it an innie.
Yeah.
This here
All
allows us to use the slope a little bit better and, lower that wall, retaining wall.
Yeah, I'm looking at it saying if someday I end up married and having kids, and my kids end up going to East School, I don't want to end up in the situation that we have at the high school where we have to look at re-engineering the exit because it's a traffic loop and it's a total disaster.
Well, don't bring
So-
your kid to school, let them ride the bus.
I was privileged, I never had to go through that, so I would never make my child go through that. No, it just, yeah. But, no, I mean, I'm looking at it saying, I can see a disaster waiting to happen.
It's evolved.
So needs to evolve before you get my approval on it.
Several thoughts. First thought is when the courthouse was going to come to Torrington, there were several property owners who submitted their parcels of land to build a new courthouse. I believe all those parcels that weren't the lucky chosen one are still available. That would be an interesting concept to look into as far as building this new so-called kindergarten complex. That's the first concept that I wanted to talk about. Second concept is we're looking at approximately 22 new classrooms.
Well, between 18 to 21, depending on how we set it up there.
So I'm basing it on the numbers that you've given. That's almost $2 million a classroom, to build each classroom. Well, what I did was I took $72 million
Then
that
you have the renovate of the existing 40 classrooms.
okay.
So you have
Right.
60.
The way I looked at the numbers that you somehow I read about, it's a $72 million approximate project. $6 million you were looking to spend for a new administrative complex. So it's $4 million, and it was 24 to 28 million for the renovation of East School.
The
That was
original
an
was
estimate
28
a few
million.
years back.
Okay, well, no, those are your numbers that you did with your capital improvement plan that you put on the financial statements last month, isn't it?
About that.
Yeah. So if you minus all of those, that leaves you with a balance of, let's say, anywhere between 20 to 24 million dollars. So you do 20, say, classroom, that's approximately $2 million per classroom. What?
You said you have 20 million left over?
Right, okay, it's $1 million, I'm sorry,
That's
$1
okay.
million per classroom. That sounds quite steep, doesn't it, for a classroom? I mean, so think of it this way, if you had,
It's $500 a square foot is the cost roughly. But that could, a lot of the cost is in the developing of the site, which as we're refining this, we're trying to reduce our impact on the site to get that number down.
so just assuming that you had $1 million per classroom, we couldn't go $2 million for each location that we presently have and put the $2 million into each of the existing grammar schools?
Ken,
Yes, sir?
we're specifically examining that, Andrew, as an alternative to the renovation to accommodate all-day kindergarten or just more classroom space that would approximate this. Probably next budget committee, if not the following one meeting, we'll have answers as to what, at each neighborhood school, what it would cost to renovate to bring all first floors or as many as we need up to standard for kindergarten, pre-K. So you need to add bathrooms, you need to have a sink.
Right.
Just be a bathroom.
You'd really have to tear out quite a bit.
It seemed like the biggest problem that all the grammar schools would have is just really the physical land capacity.
Except Torringford really is. But here again, how much money do you want to put into a school that's one of our most recent renovations?
But you have to watch what happens. If you modify a school that was recently modified, there's a fine there that you have to pay back. So that's another.
And I guess if, what concerns me the most is, why is the board looking to do this massive project? I understand it's always nice to do everything probably at once, but when we really started this whole concept several years ago, really was just the renovation of East School. And going from the renovation of East School at $25 million, we've almost tripled that number from the original concept. And I think we should think more in terms of breaking this whole project down to our original concept, getting that potentially done, and then looking at the second two concepts, which is where do we want to do our all-day kindergarten and where do we want to do our administrative building. I think that's more logical. It all depends on the time parameters. And I think the other concept is this money always going to be out there? I mean, is there a time rush? So
We don't know that. I mean, I think you change the reimbursement rate tomorrow. You know, if the budgets get tight, they could change the reimbursement rate and drop it to 50% from 74. You don't know.
And that being said, then maybe what we should, again, as a board, we should probably try to look at doing what our number one priority is, get that money, get the public to hopefully vote to at least do the renovation of East School, and then stagger the second and third concept down the road. Unless the renovate, but I don't even, if you're looking at renovating East School, physical building is where the physical building is. Once you renovated it and you decided a year or two down the road that you were going to need to do this entire new construction, new conceptual plan, that work would not be diminished in any way. You would have renovated East School, and you're not going to lose any.
You're going to have to pay back the money.
You have to, if you're going to put it on the same site.
If you modify the school you just renovated, you're going to have to reimburse the state the money they gave you. That's the problem with the all or now concept that we're
Okay.
stuck with, is we can't go to Torringford School and change it without getting penalized, because we're within the 25 years of that being worked on. And we just worked on Forbes within 25 years. We worked on Vogel Wetmore within 25 years. We worked on Southwest. The only school we have left that we wouldn't be penalized on is East. And that's the reason for trying to shove all this into one bag.
Even though the renovation is one separate entity, and really what you're doing is adding a whole new concept.
I agree with you. In concept, I totally agree with you, but unfortunately, they would consider that to be a project within the time period, and they'll tell you you should have thought about it when you were building.
And can you not, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to hit a certain threshold before you can bond it. So otherwise, it has to come into out of operating costs. So to do a piecemeal at each school, what will be, I mean, taxpayers would need to have it right there.
Well, I mean, neither project is both projects, both the $4 or $5 million for the administrative building and the $40 million plus to do the kindergarten facility, would both have to be bonded and go to referendum.
Maybe I misunderstood. I took it that you were suggesting that at each school, we could perhaps be doing small renovations and staggering it if there's no pressing need for all-day kindergarten. Our 5-year goal is all-day kindergarten, then we
Right.
can, over 5 years, make those renovations. And what I'm saying is, if you do that and you're not at a certain point, then you can't bond the money, so it's gotta come, it would have to come directly out of operating, well, not
Right.
operating, but that year.
Then I guess the next question, or maybe the last question is, if you were to build, say, both the new kindergarten and the new administrative building on another location, separate of this renovation project, what would be our funding on a brand-new school?
We would get a 64% reimbursement versus a 74%.
10 point.
So then
And we are looking, we did actually, I'm sorry, but we did entertain using the sports fields next to the middle school. And we looked at several options of taking and building a complex there. But it only further compounds the drive from the other side of town, but it's real estate that we have. And we wouldn't have to look for other space.
And when you start looking at 42 million, well, almost $50 million for the second two projects, I do remember that most of the people that were offering the tracts of land for the courthouse were in the $1 to $2 million price range. They were centrally located downtown. Again, it goes with the city's side and what the city is hoping to do, which is to somehow stimulate the center of Torrington. And that would always be my preference, to see downtown Torrington, a centralized location. And even going past all of the dollars and cents, it seems to me that a child 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, being on a bus for 30 minutes, 20 minutes each way is just not what I just think that's almost cruel.
This was, again, all we're looking at here is this is an exercise to see if it fits. Can we pack, without having to purchase any property, without having to, can we make one center, is it feasible? And if it's not, it's not. And we're looking at cost, we're looking at, like I said, we looked at putting a facility over at the middle school, or however we could try to break it up. And the Midgeon Avenue piece is really an exercise on our part, because it's come up at the board level for the last, I might have even been coming up when you were on the board 6 years ago, to close Midgeon Avenue. So it was, well, what would it be? Well, once we started getting the numbers on it, I believe our Midgeon Avenue renovation was somewhere between $700,000 and $900,000, and this is $4 million. So obviously, it's not cost effective to move Midgeon Avenue to East School. It would be more cost effective to renovate the existing building. So that, I think when you start breaking it down, you'll see, okay, that $72 million number, I think everybody in town would say, spend $1 million, not $4 million. And that'll get pulled out. I mean, that becomes a no-brainer, but when you're starting with the concept, you start big, and then you see how it fits.
I think at the end of the day, as far as the kindergarten, in my mind, the most pressing issue has to be what's in the best interest of a 5-year-old. And if the superintendent, she has more data and knowledge about these things than I would ever have, could explain why it would be best to have all of these kids in this one facility at one far end. And not only just that, but why it really goes against the concept of what I believe is becoming the new trend, which is to have the local grammar schools again, the neighborhood grammar school. So we go back there. And I understand.
No, just 1 second. You can go right back. Sure. I need a motion to extend the meeting past 9 o'clock, because our 10 o'clock is now 9 o'clock. That's
Okay.
so moved.
Yeah.
Second.